but they will be coming forward and speaking about the star beings. And I hope to actually be able to share some of that information with the people that come to the Great Gathering site from these different indigenous tribes when they do start talking about the star beings.
Super. To the phones we go now. We'll pick it up by going to Mike in Butte, Montana, west of the Rockies. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, hello, George. Hello,
Hi.
hello, ma'am. I wanted to ask you if you've, I know you don't want to go into the specific prophecies, but I heard of a prophecy. They called it the spider webs in the sky, and people thought that was phone lines and power lines at first. But I was wondering if maybe that didn't have to do with the cross hatching of the contrails.
Yeah, good possibility. What do you think of that, Miriam?
I believe that it is up to interpretation of all of us to be able to come through. I know that is not a clear answer because I can't tell you what the Hopi, for example, that particular prophecy means to them. I have heard certain Hopis say that it actually was airplanes and not chemtrails, that it's the airplanes in the sky and not chemtrails. There's a difference between those two things. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. I believe that it's airplanes, not phone lines, and not chemtrails. It's the airplanes crossing in the sky.
Okay, next up we go to Janice. Let's see. Nope. We're going to Bill in San Diego. You're up with us. Go ahead, Bill.
Hello.
Bill, you with us? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. I'm calling. I wanted to clarify that I am a member of the Hopi tribe.
All right. Good.
And I wanted to make a comment regarding Miriam's comments about the Kachinas. And wanted to explain to you that the basic definition of a Kachina is, as most Native Americans believe, that most things have spirits on this earth, that's what the Kachina is. It means the spirit. And and then the other comment regarding the Kachinas as our gods is not entirely correct. It is partially correct. When we have our social dances in the plazas, that's where you'll see the Kachinas that represent spirits. And there are deity Kachinas as well, but those Kachinas will never present themselves in a society dance.
Bill, I would just like to thank you for coming onto the program and clarifying that, because the understanding...
callers to be able to understand a little bit more and to have a little bit of clarity. And I was not raised traditional, but I have those beliefs in my heart and have walked my path in that light as best as I could.
All right, very good. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go to Chris in Ohio on the wild card line. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, I'm one of those people that has missing time back years ago, and I've been saying to my friends a lot of things that she said is the spiritual change, not the end of the world in 2012. And my question is, being an Indian background in my family, DNA change there, do you think there's a message that maybe been implanted in my subconscious that's there that I'm not aware of? And a lot of us like that have been picked up with this missing time?
Oh, my goodness, absolutely. I don't even have a question about that. That is absolutely what it is, because a lot of people that have had missing time or been picked up, and people who have this indigenous background, they have this special DNA within them, meaning the DNA is already activated. It doesn't mean that the rest of humanity doesn't have it. It means that it's active, it's alive. And within that DNA, there are messages to us it's like saying, this is how we're going to conduct ourselves while we're living on the planet. It gives us a code of ethics.
I've thought about going into hypnosis and see if that message was there. Do you think that would help?
I have a word of caution about going into hypnosis, and I would say that it is a very powerful tool that can be used to bring back memories. The question you need to ask yourself is, are you prepared for the answers that you will find once you go there? Because if you have that missing time, and it could be a very frightening experience that you will have had because it was something so out of the ordinary.
I was with a person who had been picked up several times before, which scared me, and they never told me till years later. So that's,
well,
I was out on a date, and we talked about it here not recently and said, well, she's out on the mountain on top Colorado, and said, if they want to come see me, I'm here,
Well, this is the thing. This is one of the most fascinating parts, is that we who have had experiences tend to gravitate towards one another.
Dreams of speaking to a creator or something out there in the universe, and little messages here and there, and I'm afraid to go any farther.
Well,
but all good, all good.
If you have that native background within you, then my advice to you is to find your own, going back to your own traditional storytelling, and get some of those stories from your traditional elders. I actually had an experience with that with an individual in the Navajo community who heard me on Coast, actually, George, last time I was on, and then went to a number of different, he started asking his elders because he thought, my gosh, this sounds so close to the stories that he had heard as a child from his elders. And he quickly came to realize that many of the things that I was sharing with him were identical, and the elders actually shared even more information with him because he was awakening to remembering who he actually was. And so because you have that, have you spoken to any of your traditional elders, or do you even know how to contact them?
That's important too, isn't it?
It's extremely important.
Next up, Janice in San Jose, California. Go ahead, Janice.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
This question is for Miriam. You had mentioned that the Hopi and the people in Western culture and other cultures need to come together and compromise with each other. What would the Hopi be expected to compromise on? Because I'm very skeptical about having the indigenous people having to compromise on really anything, because they've been around for thousands of years and they seem to know what they're doing. So what would they be expected to compromise on? Thank you so much.
Oh, my gosh, I'm so glad she asked that question so that I can clarify that a bit. And this is what happens. We have to use the English language that doesn't always communicate perfectly. The compromise isn't necessarily a compromise. It's a coming together. It's finding the balance between the two worlds. The compromise is not, let's remove that word, and I apologize if I use that specific word, because that's not what my intention or focus was. What needs to happen is that the people from the traditional world need to, come forward in whatever terms they lay out for us, and be able to speak to us with whatever terms they choose, because it is their world. But we need to meet them halfway with the level of respect that we can give them, and with an understanding of the knowledge that they choose to share with us. And we need to be respectful in being able to listen to those messages. It's not a compromise. We need to come together, and we need to bring those two worlds together and find that balance between the two of them. They need to, I would say that we need to continue on our path. They need to continue on theirs, because I can't go and live in their world. I'm a white and I'm a woman, and I have never been indoctrinated into any of that type of a society. We need to find the balance between the two of them is what we need to do. And I know that the many indigenous cultures around the world are looking for different ways to be able to come out and speak to the world right now, such as the sacred people in Colombia, the Kogi and the Mamos in the Sierra Nevada that I'm going to see next month. They're looking for ways to be able to communicate with us. So I don't think it's a compromise. I think it's we need to meet them halfway, because they're starting to come and try and talk to us, and we need to be respectful of what they're saying.
Did you ever investigate the ant people and what that exactly was, what they meant by those creatures?
There is no question that the ant people were the ETs.
Yeah. That were underground, maybe?
There are different ET bases even right now that are under the earth, all over the planet. And I know of one in particular that is in the Four Corners area, and I'm not going to say its exact location. And it is not Dulce. It is in another area, and I've never said that publicly. But there is another area that is close to there where there is an actual underground base, and they're still currently residing there.
Now,
that's my information, not from anyone else. That's my information.
This date of December 21st, 2012, in your opinion, though you say, it's not the end of the world, are we going to continue to see signs leading up to that time period of something marvelous happening?
Yes. As you stated yourself, George, that we're all feeling this, it's like a stirring inside of ourselves that many people don't even understand. We are going through this transitional time with our DNA and our, perceptions, and, more and more people are being able to see ghosts, for example, and having psychic abilities and synchronicities happening and this type of thing. 2012 and leading up to that, the date does have significance. It's not as though it doesn't. The date is significant because, as people have already talked about in the past with the rotation of the actual universe itself and the lining up of the planets, and the solar flares are going to continue to increase, and the electrical energy that's coming from the other side of the universe is beginning to come to us at this point and filter down onto the Earth, George. And this is where it gets into the bit of the scientific area of it. It's affecting our electrical bodies, and so it's charging our brains and sending extra impulses, which in turn is beginning to wake us up to other areas of spiritualism, of understanding, comprehension. Our DNA is awakening, so we're physically changing as human beings also. And the solar flares are going to increase. The volcanic eruptions are going to increase, and the earthquakes are going to increase. Those three things are definitely going to be happening. But we're already seeing that, so we don't need to panic. We just need to know that there is a very good chance that we are going to continue to see the same level that we've been at already, and we just need to prepare ourselves physically for that change. Is that clear, George?
Yeah, and you're right. We are seeing these activities now.
And these prophecies are talking about this. This is another thing. The Hopi have clearly told me that the reason that they go into the kivas to do this amazing ceremony that they're currently in is to show the respect towards one another, and to show that the reason that they're doing it is to hold the balance of everything. And we as outsiders, basically, if you're a human being, you're here. We're doing it together. We're creating our future. So if we want to talk about 2012 and the destruction of the Earth, it's great fun to talk about that, and it's great fun to talk about all of these scientific pieces of information. And there's many people who want to hear that kind of information. But the fact is, when you take that all and break it down and put it at the very, very base, we are human beings, George, and we need to smarten up. And that's what these prophecies in the biblical terms, in the indigenous world, and in the ET world, they are all identical.
Does it bother you when you see what Hollywood does with some of these prophecies?
Oh, it's very upsetting to me. Because and this is also very upsetting to Hopi. I do know this, because the traditional leaders look at 2012 and they think, are we, these tribes, the Mayans are saying, are we responsible for this? we sent this message out. You see? That's why they haven't come forward. We sent this message out, but the message was supposed to be about this beautiful transition. And the Hopi have said to me very clearly, the prophecy is not about the end of the world. It is about this beautiful world on the other side of this transition that we're walking through.
Well, they seem to have a good perspective of the future, huh?
Yes, they do. And I'm sorry I'm not able to follow through to give people doom and gloom. I can't do it because it's not the way it is. I don't think
we always need that. Stay with us. We're going to be right back with final phone calls with Miriam Delicato on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, Lauren Coleman joins us as we talk about the top 10 crypto stories in 2009. Fascinating work there. When we come back, though, we'll take final phone calls with Miriam Delicato on Coast to Coast AM. Where I have to compliment you on your work. Fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
Let's go to some. Go ahead,
George. I know that the Hopi haven't come forward, and that it's just a matter of time before they do. And I really know that I know these people. I know the Hopi are, trying to stay as close to their ceremonies as they can in this world, and as close to the original sacred ways as they possibly can. And we need to respect that. And that means that respecting my message also, in the sense that we as outsiders have no right to talk about their prophecies and to make determinations as to whether or not their prophecies have come to pass and what they mean. And so, this is the reason that I came on to the program, was to try and clarify that, because 2012 is not, and I can say this, that 2012 is not the doomsday that they have built up in mainstream society. And as we move into this very special time that we're in, it's even more critical that we can remain respectful towards one another, because the more we can respect the Hopi, the more possibility it is for them to come forward and speak to us and really share their prophecies with us.
Well, a lot of people, Mary, may be let down on December 21st, 2012. The day will come and go. Nothing will probably happen. And they'll go, what? That was it?
Right. And then what are we going to do, George?
Yeah, exactly.
Then what will we do? We'll all be in the same situation, but we will not have changed anything. And this is the most fascinating part of this entire experience for me, is that the prophecies that the ETs gave me about how we were going to move into this time where people were going to start losing their minds, they told me that. They said people are going to start to go a little bit crazy because they're not going to be able to deal with the different energy that their bodies are having to deal with because of the solar flares and the universal energy that's being bombarded onto the planet right now to our electrical systems. They told me about that in '88. And then as I started to see this buildup of this happening, it becomes very interesting. And they told me that these different people, very special people, meaning the indigenous, were going to begin to come together, and that they knew when they'd already been given signs of when to come forward, and that is happening. They told me that we were going to move into what's called the time of choice for humanity, and we are moving into that. A lot of these messages that were given to me 22 years ago have all begun to either have happened or are happening right now. So I see no reason why that isn't going to continue. And if it continues, what I know will take place is that those people who really do have good intention for humanity and the earth, and the star seed people that are out there, the star family, like myself, are going to come together and rally in order to support the indigenous in whatever way and on whatever terms they choose. And we will be respectful of that, but we will come together without this ego that takes place. And it will not be to sell an event or to make a name for ourselves, because so many people out there, George, are working towards the same goal of this great gathering. And all of them are starting to come together now with this massive network. And that includes the indigenous. And I'm not sure how much your listeners are aware of that movement, of the indigenous community and what is actually taking place with them right now.
Probably not a lot, unless, someone like you comes on the program to talk about it.
Because what is happening right now is that for many of them that, as I say, have managed to remember these prophecies that were given to them, and they're all going to have slightly different languages to how they express or explain this, using the language that most people will understand out there, the prophecies. And because most of those prophecies have been fulfilled for many of these ancient people around the planet, they are coming forward and saying, now it's time to speak to the world, because we're at the last phase before it's too late to change the course that humanity is on. All you need to do is say, right, okay, we've got pollution, we have political problems, we have financial problems, we have spiritual problems, and those need to be addressed. But we need to do it one step at a time. And that the first step is to respect one another for our own views and opinions, and to be able to begin a dialogue around the earth. Because it's the dialogue that allows people to learn about the different cultures and the different prophecies and the different religions. And that's what this great gathering is about all of that. The indigenous community is actually, has been for the last few years, been communicating with one another in very secret meetings, and moving more and more and more public all the time. And I know that there is another gathering that is being planned in Guatemala for next year. I'm not sure of any of the details, but there is another gathering of these indigenous people being planned in Guatemala. And it's significant to the world. And if we can give them the opportunity and the space to be able to come to us and say, this is what we want to share with you, we need to open the door. And that's the halfway point. We need to open the door to them because they're coming towards us. And they do have sacred knowledge. And that's what the sacred knowledge actually is. It's about how to live with the earth, because their words are very powerful, much more powerful than mine could ever be.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take some final calls. Let's go to Homer, Alaska. David, you're up on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, David.
Hi, George and Miriam. Miriam, the elders, the sacred knowledge that they have of the rituals and ceremonies and prophecies, are they going to be able to hand that down to the next generation of Hopis, or is this going to die out with them?
Oh, my goodness, that's a beautiful question. Thank you. I'm going to say this for all indigenous people and not just for Hopi. There is a struggle going on to be able to maintain their sacred ways and their traditional ways and the ceremonies and passing them on, absolutely, because of the outside influences. And unfortunately, what has happened is they got had a lot of the language taken away from them that is so critical to the ceremonial way in many tribes, and which they still have very, very strongly maintained in Hopi, is the Hopi language. And the Hopi language in itself is very intricate, and it's on different levels. For example, there's daily life, there's the Kiva life, there's the ceremonial language. There's different levels of this language that they have. I don't believe that it's going to die out in this generation, no, because they are still doing their ceremonies in one of the mesas in particular, Second Mesa, who has a very strong connection to those ceremonies. So I don't believe that it's going to die out in this. That's my outsider opinion, absolutely not. But it is something to be aware of, because sacred knowledge, what is sacred knowledge, and who has a right to this knowledge? Sacred knowledge is just simply the voice of an elder speaking. That's sacred knowledge. Whatever it is that they choose to share, that is the sacred knowledge. But the ceremonies themselves need to be passed down within these cultures themselves, because it takes much more than a year or 2 or 3 of living with a particular culture to truly understand it. It takes a lifetime. So it needs to be maintained in those particular societies and with those indigenous groups around the world. And that's why if, for example, the Kogi of the Sierra Nevada are trying to buy the land on the mountain to save it from being industrialized, we need to find a way to try and support that, or to find a way to stop the industrialization of that particular area.
Okay, let's go now to Carson City, Nevada. Margot, west of the Rockies. Hey, Margot.
Hello, George. Hello, Miriam. My goodness. I had a dream about, 8 years ago, about a buffalo shaman coming down a trail, and he was obviously coming from a private ceremony, and he was just as shocked as I was to see him on that trail, and he was very fierce, and it just brought home to me everything you're saying about the dualism and the industrial needing to meet the native traditions and the indigenous traditions and meeting them halfway. And it really, this whole program has brought that home and reminded me of this. And the date of December 21st, 2012 equals 2 in numerology, which is dualism, and it's also secret knowledge. And so the passing of that may not die out with the indigenous people if we are willing to meet them halfway, and more than halfway, and accept and understand them, and create something new, and pass through this gateway. We've been given opportunities before and not recognized them and not done much about it. And bless you both for having this program tonight. I'm going to get off the line so that other people can talk a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Next up, we go to Sean, also in Nevada. You're up with us. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was just wondering exactly. Hi, George, and hi, Marion.
Hi.
I just want to know exactly who these ETs are that you're talking about. It sounds to me, from some of the research I've done, that you're talking about Pleiadians, but I just want to know exactly who you're talking about here.
Fair enough.
I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mary.
The ETs that I have contact with, I get asked this all the time. The original ones that I had contact with on board the craft in '88, I can't tell you exactly what group they're from. But here's what I can tell you, is that I've had contact with, if I take a look, I've never been physically told by any particular group, we are from this particular group, the Andromedan, the Pleiadian, the Sirian, the Orions, the this, the that, and the list goes on. But what I can say is that they are from all of these groups. I've had contact from all of them because they're all very similar to one another. The messages are similar to one another, and some of them are interdimensional, some of them are on different planets, some of them are here on the Earth, and some of them have traveled from other planets to come here to reside on this Earth, under the Earth itself, in massive caves and under the waters that we have here under the oceans. And so the main group that I associate with are who I call the tall blondes, and I believe that they are in the hierarchy, that they are one of the groups that has the ability to actually travel between all of these different dimensions and planet systems. Because you're getting into something that's very scientific now, that people have a very difficult time wrapping their heads around how this can happen with the light energy and the molecules and how they travel through light to be able to go from point A to point B. This light system is also one of the ways that they're able to travel from the interdimensionally to come into our dimension, which is why you might see the appearance of a craft and then poof, it disappears. It's because it's working on a light frequency, which is a little bit more advanced than most people are able to understand. And it's difficult to explain for me because I don't have the, quote, scientific language of this world.
Okay, next up we go to Milwaukee. Gerald, take it away. Hi, Gerald.
Yes, good morning. My question is, if we as an individual, as an outsider, wish to go to the Hopi and meet them and talk with them and learn, how would we meet them? How would we address them? How would we be respectful of them and let them know that we were sincere in our search?
Good question.
Excellent question. Excellent question for any indigenous tribe. You walk up to them and you go to their area. For example, in Hopi, there's the Hopi Cultural Center. Lovely place. Got a hotel there. Please book ahead because it's very small and there's nothing else in the area. So go ahead and make your time there and just sit quietly and talk to people. Go into some of the shops that they have. Talk about their jewelry. Talk about the different symbols that they have and just basically start a dialogue. You can't walk up to them and start questioning them about prophecies and expect them to answer your questions. But you really can learn a lot about Hopi just by going and having a conversation. And with any tribe out there, that's what I would suggest. And it's through that dialogue that we are going to be able to make a transition in this world and that we're going to be able to find that bridge between the indigenous world and the industrialized world.
Next up, go ahead.
Which is what the Great Gathering is really about. It's about all of us having a dialogue from around the world, which is where we're headed with the whole movement and the website. We're already doing it. Everyone is.
We've got Mary in Salt Lake City. Mary, a couple minutes to go. Go ahead.
Hi. I have always dreamed that I was an Indian. I know this sounds ridiculous, but I even sleep outside in the summer in a tent. And my husband hears me speak a different language at night. I have knowledge of things and places to go. I told him 8 years ago we needed to move to the Four Corners area, things like this. And I'm wondering if reincarnation, is this possible?
Absolutely. Reincarnation is part of our process in the entire spectrum of life itself. And reincarnation is something that is a little bit complex because part of your spirit can incorporate itself back into a body, or the whole soul that was in the last life could choose to return in this life. So you could very well have memories of the last physical body that you resided in on this earth or elsewhere, which for someone like myself, I have glimpses of another life on another planet. And so this is a very much a reality for many, many people because they have these snippets or actually a great deal of remembering of these other lives.
Some people just want to pick up and go and move and just head west.
Yeah. Let's go.
Would you ever live with the Hopis if you had to?
Yes.
You would?
Yes. I've spent a fair amount of time there. And I would live there in a heartbeat.
You
Absolutely.
Wouldn't miss a big city or anything like that?
No. There is something about that area that if you can open your heart up, George, now I'm going to interview you. Have you ever been to Hopi, George?
I have not.
Well, I would.
That's why I put you on.
Well, dear, I think that you should. I think that you should have a trip to Hopi and meet some of the elders, and maybe we can work on that
and talk them into getting on the program. Blue Star Fulfilling Prophecy. Where do you get this book?
On my website at bluestarprophecy.com. It's available there, and anyone that picks it up from me, I'll be more than happy to sign it for them also. And I hope that they'll be able to check out the greatgathering.org site and note that it will be a process of growing and expanding on that site. So we're really going to ask people to watch that over the next couple of months. And we're going to give you information and step-by-step of how to make it happen and how to actually contact the indigenous people in your area to be respectful with them and
Super.
how to respect them.
Miriam, you have a great holiday, and thank you for the information.
Thank you very much, George. It's been a pleasure.
When we come back, Lauren Coleman joins us as we talk about the top 10 crypto stories of 2009. Well, tonight we're going to talk about the top 10 crypto stories of 2009 with none other than Loren Coleman. And that'll be next on Coast to Coast AM. Loren Coleman, of course, researcher. He introduces us to the fascinating world of cryptozoology, and he is a leading researcher on the Bigfoot phenomenon as well. Here he is, our final hour on Coast to Coast. Loren, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, George. How are you doing? I'm doing fine.
You're up and at 'em, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. It's great to be here with you.
I loved your top 10 crypto stories of 2009. How'd you pick them?
Well, I look at the stories that are important to cryptozoology, but also are important to the media and popular culture. You know, we, of course, as cryptozoologists are out there looking for obscure animals, but we have to occasionally acknowledge that the general public has some say on what's the most popular one. So I looked through the list of things and tried to come up with the important ones, and it was a very calm list compared to 2008, and I was very happy about that.
2008.
Yeah, 2008 with the Georgia Bigfoot, with our friend from Las Vegas who got involved too. But this list was much calmer, not so hysterical, and much more hardworking. People were really out there in the field. Some interesting discoveries were made, and I had fun putting it together.
Now, when you categorize them, are they all top 10, or was one the best, and you went from there?
Well, I think it was more an even playing field this year because there wasn't anything crazy and hysterical like somebody saying that they had a costume under ice,
Yeah, exactly.
In the middle of the summer, you always look for the middle of the summer, at least in the northern hemisphere, a story that's going to pop out. And that probably was that video from Lake Champlain that got the most attention in the middle of the summer. But this fall, it's been interesting how some of the other stories, such as the opening of the museum or the Black Panther stories, have been popping up quite a bit this fall. So, it's kind of each season seems to have had a special one. But then the reason I picked number one, Cryptozoology Expeditions Explore the World, is all year there were different field researchers out there just below the radar, and then they would get on some of these reality shows or appear on radio, and those really kind of was the theme of the year, that there was actual expeditions exploring the world.
I think that's exciting for crypto, don't you, these expeditions?
Oh, yeah, I think the expeditions in cryptozoology really sets up almost the next decade in some ways. If you have Yeti expeditions, the Sumatran Orangai Pindek, which a lot of us think is going to be the next great ape discovered over there in Indonesia, even the really mistaken Siberian snowman expeditions that sort of they went out and found some caves and then they ran out of money and supplies, they said, and they had to go back. It was personified what's happening with the Russians. They sort of start things and then they can't finish them right now. So, and then, of course, the American Bigfoot, it was such a cautious year. You have the bogus Bigfoot trail cam situation going on up in Minnesota. So people are not so kind of out there with being very excited about American Bigfoot right now. So it's
Loren,
interesting time.
Tell us about the Siberian snowman.
Well, the Siberian snowman, this was a creature that was reported somewhat in the spring, said to look, hairy with fangs and almost, and I do have a drawing of it up on my website, which I know you're linking to.
Yeah.
And it just looks like a scary kind of thing from the 1950s movies. But the Siberian explorers and Russians zoomed out there on their snowmobiles, and they had some kind of touch and go times in which they couldn't get out there, and then they kind of found the cave but couldn't find anything in the cave. So, as I mentioned on the list, that was kind of typical for the year because all the results of the expeditions, at least at this stage, seemed to be very frustrating. Stops and starts, some footprints found, some of the ones like the Yeti and the Bhutan and explorations are finding hairs or finding footprints that are still being analyzed. So there is some hope for the future there. The one that's, as I mentioned earlier, the Rangay Pindek in Sumatra keeps coming up with the best results. There seems to be good sightings, good footprints found, and I have the feeling that the whole fact that the British group, the Flora and Fauna Society, have funded quietly for 2 decades now, researchers actually in the field are going to have the best results long term.
Do you think one day we will find an actual, honest-to-goodness dinosaur?
Well, no. I mean, just to be frank, I think that a lot of the reports of the dinosaurs are misinterpreted. They may be new aquatic rhinos, or they may be a monitor lizard, but it's very hard to think that a large reptile from 65 million years ago on land is going to exist. I mean, a lot of people, of course, are very excited by the coelacanth, which was discovered and supposedly had been extinct for 65 million years since the time of the dinosaurs. I think we're going to find more large mystery animals from the ocean that may be, quote-unquote, survivors from the dinosaur era. And that, I think, is more logical.
Tell us about number 2, world's first crypto museum.
Right. Well, this has been in the works for quite a while, but in 2009, for the first time, the International Cryptozoology Museum went public, and went public in probably one of the worst months in the time to go public, November. But despite this, over 500 people visited there. This, of course, is a museum that I set up, and I modestly, considered whether or not I should put it on a list, but I kept getting feedback from so many people, and actually it was picked to be on another list, so that I went ahead and despite my modestness, I had to, George, what really did it for me is the first weekend that it was open, some woman, about a 25-year-old woman and her mother, showed up at the door with tears in her eyes, saying that, Lauren Coleman, I've known you for so many years on Coast to Coast that I had to come to the museum to see you in the museum.
Cool.
And then her mother started crying too, and it was like, Coast to Coast for many people is their introduction to international cryptozoology. So it really got to my heart.
That is neat. Number 3, coelacanth. How do you pronounce that, baby?
The coelacanth. These baby coelacanths, which means hollow tube because they have no spine. They just have a spinal cord that's full of fluid. For the first time ever, in November, it was announced that the previous month, the Japanese had gone down in an unmanned submersible and filmed baby coelacanths, which are about 12 inches long. And this is a living fossil that was discovered recently in 1998 off of the coast of Indonesia. And then also was announced that a toy maker, which is really a museum-quality toy maker, Safari, is coming out with some new coelacanth models next year, which are quite exciting because these kinds of things really teach our future generations about cryptozoology and exploration.
And what's so amazing, Lauren, that they continue to find these new creatures all over the planet as well.
Oh, yes.
I mean, they're everywhere, by the hundreds in some cases.
Right. In the last decade, there's 400 new species, larger new species. I mean, we find insects, of course, and fish and things like that all the time. Yeah. But these large species are still being found at a remarkable rate.
Number 4, the Champ video.
This is the Champ video. This is on May 31st, a young man who is a new father, and he had a ritual of going down to Lake Champlain and filming sunrises and sunsets. Just kind of something artistic. And he noticed over to the side here, to his right, was this creature in the water. And so he flipped around his cell phone camera and took this remarkable video. He never claimed it was Champ, but all of the newspapers and other media just quickly jumped on it as a Champ video. And so I actually have it there on the site so that people can play the video and look at it.
What do you think it looks like to you?
Well, I think it's interesting. It really does look like a larger than normal otter, and that's why I've uploaded Bernard Heuvelman, the godfather of cryptozoology, his drawing of the super otter, which is an unknown species. It just does not look like, the early skeptics were saying this is a deer or this is a moose, or even when somebody said it was an elk, and there are no elk in Vermont, at least not ones that aren't in captivity. It's not a dog. It just is very much matches what people have reported for the Lake Champlain monsters.
Number 5.
Number 5 was a really kind of strange case. Here's in November 14th, a man is out what they call spotlighting for pigs in Australian bush. And he comes across what he thought was a wild pig, and he shot it. It turned out to be a pygmy hippo, which are known from Africa. And here he's in Australia.
Jeez.
So quickly, this is 2009, and people jump in, the skeptics and debunkers jump in and said, oh, well, this is a hippo that must have escaped whenever they closed a wildlife sanctuary in 2003. It must have got out, and it's been living out there for 6 years, and we just didn't know about it. Well, maybe that's true, but what's so intriguing is here we had something that maybe was out in the bush from Africa, and all of a sudden, as opposed to somebody just reporting it and not being believed, this young man shot it thinking it was a pig, and now we have the evidence. There's this very strange animal that was out there in the Australian bush. Origin unknown.
I love number 6.
Well, number 6 got a lot of play. Here we have a 19-year-old woman, and I have her picture there, not the one of her in the bikini, but her showing the video that was taken. She and her boyfriend were down at a creek in the mountains of Poland, and her boyfriend's taking video of her splashing around in the water, and then all of a sudden a quote-unquote Yeti shows up in the background dancing around and then went off into the woods. Now, this video got an incredible amount of play online in August, and it concurrently was also happened when another man, a 27-year-old man, took moving pictures further away in the mountains of Poland. So there was these two videos, and so I asked, were they persons in monkey suits, or were they separate footage of genuine ape-like creatures in Poland? We don't know, but everybody should go online and look at this video of this young woman, which I'm sure you enjoyed too.
Number 7.
Number 7. Okay, here we are.
The alligator in the sewer, huh?
Well, this is a story that's been around since I wrote an article in the 70s talking and finding the source of the alligators in the sewers was indeed quote unquote real, because as opposed to everybody thinking these were white alligators in the 1960s in fields of marijuana in the sewers, the stories actually first show up in the 1930s. So the New York Times, in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of a book about that time, the city under the city, Robert Daly, an old reporter for the New York Times, was interviewed. And then the New York Times went one step beyond. They looked up the old stories that I'd found, and they went back and found one of the men that had killed the alligator, the 8-foot-long alligator, in 1935. He's 92 years old, and they re-interviewed him and confirmed that the man existed, that the story actually happened, that an alligator was killed. And as opposed to what a lot of people down through the years had said, that this was nothing but an elaborate newspaper hoax, the man exists, the writer of the story exists, who had also interviewed the superintendent of the sewers at the time and said his men were going into the sewers and shooting the alligators because they were, the superintendent of the sewers had originally sent inspectors into the sewers to see if his men were drinking. Well, they came back and said, no, there are 2-foot and 8-foot long alligators down there. So he sent in a group of other guys with rifles to kill them in the 1930s. It's a true story. Just one that a lot of us thought was always science fiction.
Those sewers, Lauren, must be packed with creatures. You know what?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the rats and all kinds of human hamburgers that never got eaten. There's all kinds of food down there for even bigger creatures, and Monster Quest did a series this fall in which they looked at alligators in the sewers, and it's a kind of an unknown fact, but on alligator farms, they actually raise them in the dark because alligators grow faster when they're raised in the dark. This whole business about that alligators need sunlight and all of that is just another myth, because there's so many toxic overload and spillover from human habitation that go into the sewers. They get all their vitamins from how much we pump vitamins into ourselves because we aren't getting enough sunshine.
Number 8.
Number 8 is kind of a conglomerate here. I divided up the discoveries of the animals under 8 and 9. Under 9, I looked at the giant woolly rat, which was discovered. There was 2 giant rats discovered. One was on a mountain in February in the South Philippines. And then in September, they found a new giant woolly rat that was found in the crater of an extinct volcano in Papua New Guinea. And it's just been a great year for kind of new chameleons, new lizards, new rats. But also there's been some bigger animals like the civet cat, which was discovered in Sri Lanka, and a whole new species of pink and black iguana was found on the Galapagos Island. So, it's one of those good years for animals, discovering new animals that everybody just took for granted weren't going to have any new animals again, but they're still popping up.
And you tied 9 into that, too, then, with some of these.
Yeah, well, 9 is animals that had supposedly gone extinct but were discovered. And here's what's interesting about that is that, indeed, for instance, a crow that was not seen for 107 years was found in Indonesia. A turtle that had not been seen for decades, and its name translates as the turtle that eats rhino feces, was rediscovered in September in the old Burma. But the next 2 that I talked about are the sad stories. Here we have a new bird that was found in the Philippines. It was a quail, hadn't been seen for a long time, had been extinct for decades, several decades. They found one, photographed it, and then they ate it. They cooked it, and then it happened again in the Philippines in March, in which they found one of these very rare megamouth sharks that had just been discovered in the 70s. The fishermen had found it, and as National Geographic News said, in a short time, one of the rarest sharks in the world went from swimming in Filipino waters to simmering in coconut milk. So they discovered it and ate it.
And number 10.
And number 10 is there's all summer from August through through October, all of Europe was talking about reports of a black panther that dominated the news. Of course, black panthers don't exist in Europe, yet people were seeing them all over. And I really extend this by saying that elsewhere in Australia and New Zealand and the UK and the United States, reports of black panthers really filled newspapers, media, and radio reports all the time, almost more than Bigfoot reports. In some ways, it was the year of the black panther.
The top 10. When we come back, let's take some phone calls with Lauren Coleman. Cryptozoology is our subject right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, on our next Coast to Coast program, Linda Moulton Howe, our investigative reporter, joins us with a number of incredible stories, including the British Ministry of Defense closing down its UFO hotline and offices as well. Hey, are you a Streamlink member? Well, if you're not, for just pennies a day, go to coasttocoastam.com. You can get downloads, podcasts, and all kinds of special nice things, including the new iPhone app, just by going to coasttocoastam.com and signing up for Streamlink. And we'll be back in a moment with phone calls with Lauren Coleman on Coast to Coast AM. Lauren, do you have a favorite crypto story or creature that's out there?
Well, since I first became interested in the Yeti, and I'm going into my 50th year next year, I'm always interested in what's going on with Yetis and things like that. But I think that my investigation of the Dover Demon in 1977, a creature that was orange and had shark-like skin, was only 3 feet tall in Dover, Massachusetts, and kind of popped in and popped out, always intrigues me because it just has no connection with anything else in cryptozoology. And yet it's not involved with UFOs or ghosts or anything like that. So between the Yetis and the Dover Demon, I'm kind of always fascinated by how very mundane things like abominable creatures are out there, but also little unknowns that kind of pop in and out too.
Did you come to any conclusions about the Dover creature?
No, not really. I think that is, I say at a lot of my talks, if you can occasionally allow yourself to say, I don't know, then you can feel comfortable being cryptozoology, because sometimes you just come to a blank wall and it's not a moose, it's not a baby horse, it's not some unknown animal that's in all of the books. It's just something that doesn't fit anywhere, and you occasionally have to face the unknown and say, there are things out there that you don't know about, and that's okay.
Okay, let's go to the phones. We'll go to Johnny, east of the Rockies in Dallas. Hey, Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the Montauk Monster was, if there was any more information regarding that.
Yeah, the Montauk Monster turned out from both European and American cryptozoologists looking at the pictures and comparing it with skulls and the feet. It was definitely a raccoon. For one thing, there were flies on the body that we could use to measure how big the body was. And the exaggerated claims that it was 7 feet long and different things like that were just way blown out of proportion. It was a raccoon that had lost its hair by washing in and out of the water several times. And so it was just and that happened, of course, in 2008. In 2009, we had a report from Panama of a creature down there that looked like the Montauk Monster, but it turned out to be a sloth that had washed in and out of water, too.
Remember all the Texas chupacabra stories we had over the last few years, Lauren?
Mangy dogs.
Mangy dogs. That's
mangy
right.
dogs and mangy coyotes. In Puerto Rico in 1995, the chupacabras were always upright, 3.5 feet tall, hair-covered primates, not at all dogs.
Next up, we go to first-time caller Matt in Sacramento, California. Matt, good morning.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
All is well.
Okay.
Hey, so the question is, as of late in the last couple of years, I've been kind of getting more into, opening my mind and energy and basically going through a bunch of different stuff. And I've been searching on the Internet, and the last year they've been, discovering a bunch of new species of animal, some, you couldn't even fathom upon coming across. And my question is, do you think the more creatures we come across here in the next couple of years, do you think we're going to see a lot more hoaxes too, and maybe possible the government, it might sound a little radical when I say this, knowledge is power, and the less that we know, it helps them out to where they might, hide evidence and do what they can to not let anything out?
Well, that's several questions. I think that in the next few years we're going to keep finding new animals because we do keep finding new animals. As far as whether or not it's the government hiding things, that's probably a whole other show. I think, for one thing, the government in many ways is a bumbling fool, so they naturally hide things, not on purpose, but just out of the bureaucracy. But I don't think there's anything sinister about it. And what was the other question, George? I forget.
Well, let's go back to him. Go ahead,
Matt. I get it. The other question was, there's a lot more development of, new species and things. Do you think us as people coming across these new species, do you think will that impact, maybe possible religion as well? We hear stories about them finding, actual, fairies. They said they found like a giant in Saudi Arabia. You know, they talk about in the Book of Genesis about giants.
Well, I think the other question you had about hoaxes, there's probably not going to be that many more hoaxes. Hoaxes are small. As far as cryptozoology getting into religion and having some impact on there, I think cryptozoology has impact across religion, popular culture, TV programs, radio shows. So I think that it's just part of culture now.
Lauren, do you ever cover the boundaries of UFOs and those kinds of cases?
Well, you know, I think there's some very good researchers out there like Jerome Clark and others that are doing that. I think I really have my hands full with cryptozoology, and I've spoken and written about how I think that the overlap between the two is really a human artifact, and that there's probably not that much connection between cryptozoology and ufology, other than the fact we both have open minds, and that's very good.
Let's go to Danielle in California, west of the Rockies. Hey, Danielle, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
Well, I just wanted to tell you and see if I could get a little feedback on something that happened to me about a year ago. I was driving home with a friend of mine, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was very dark. It wasn't a full moon or anything strange like that. And we were driving home, and I live in a very rural area, and we turned off the main road, and we were going on my street. And as we were going, my headlights illuminated something, well, that appeared to be a deer at first glance. I was looking at the road, of course, and I noticed the legs looked almost like a deer standing on its hindquarters, just standing straight up. And it was very, very tall. It was, gosh, I'm only 5'2", so the thing must have been, God, I don't know, 8 feet tall or so. And it was so dark. And as we got closer to it, it was on the other side of the road. It turned over its shoulder and looked at me. It looked at my car, and I froze, and I just kept driving. And I freaked out. I looked over at my friend, and I said, "Oh my gosh, did you just see that?" And said, "Oh my God, yes. What was that?" It was completely black, and neither one of us have really been able to place it. My best guess, I don't know if it's a werewolf or something, or is there some kind of creature that could fit that description.
What state did this happen in?
Northern California, up in the area, rural area.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, I'd want to interview you more and have a drawing if possible. Obviously, it could be a Bigfoot. It could be a deer angled. A lot of people misinterpret mule deer for Bigfoot-type creatures. I'm not sure. There are melanistic or black deer that are sometimes seen. There's also elk that. So I'd need a lot more details, but it does sound intriguing.
Well, we have a lot of deer here, and that's what I'm on the lookout for. That's why I scour the road. And this, I can assure you, from seeing deer every night of my life, was no deer. I've seen darker deer, and this was not a deer. It was, unless it was walking around on its hindquarters, if that's ever been seen.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds like a great sighting. That's good.
Okay. Thanks. David in Georgia, you're up with us on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, David.
Good morning. No, I've got a question about a sighting a couple of years ago. You know, that was thought to be extinct, and that was the ivory-billed woodpecker out in Arkansas. What? I don't hear anything more about that.
Well, there's a lot of funding that's trying to find. You know, they've got the video, they've got some recordings of the call of it, but until they can get a lot better video, people are scared about killing any of the ivory-billed woodpeckers, of course, but they need to find the nest. They need to find a lot more things. So they're pouring a lot of money into it. I think that what a lot of people don't know is that before they even announced it, the federal government had put aside $1 million and bought up a whole bunch of houses around the habitat. But the amount of evidence they have for the ivory-billed woodpecker, of course, is about 1 20th of what evidence we have for Bigfoot. And so it is pretty interesting that so much money is being spent on the ivory-billed woodpecker, and yet all we have is a very, little bit of a video and some sound, which I'm not saying it's not been discovered, but we haven't really heard that much about it lately. They are looking in other places like Florida and Cuba and Louisiana, as well as Arkansas. So we may get some news soon, but they're keeping it all very quiet.
Any more stories about Mothman at all? Seems to have gotten very quiet.
It's very quiet right now. I think after the movie came out in 2002, there were different reports from Pennsylvania, from Alaska, of thunderbirds. And, of course, a lot of us know that the word Mothman is just a copy editor in Ohio invented that name to describe the big bird reports. But from what's going on in the West Virginia area, people down there are being very quiet. There's been some eyewitnesses that have died, in the last year, some ones from the 1960s. So it's a time of reflection. And, of course, John Keel died last year. That was the last time I was on your program over the summer. And so people are kind of feeling a little bit shell-shocked by Mothman reports once again.
Let's go to Wisconsin. Mike is a first-time caller. Mike, you're on with Lauren Coleman on Coast to Coast.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi there.
I don't know if you had heard about this. It was on a show I had seen the other day, and they had found this new species of frog where the tadpoles were kept inside. She had given birth, and now these frogs are no longer around, but they were protecting them from being extinct.
Who was protecting them, Mike? Who?
The frogs were, and the tadpoles were born. They were in the inside. They showed a picture of the mother with the baby frog inside the mother's mouth. But now I don't know if they just found them, and now I guess they're gone, but it was really strange because there was a new species of frog that they just didn't want this. They acted this way.
Well, I know in Indonesia, Lauren, they found a new species, but do you know which one he's talking about?
No, I haven't. I haven't heard about that. I'll have to look it up because, there are some species that give live birth to and then they keep them on their back, inside their back for a while. So there's that species. But what he sounds like he's saying is that these were discovered and then became extinct or disappeared. So I'm going to look into that one.
Do frogs eat their young?
Some bullfrogs actually, some of the types of frogs do eat the tadpoles. They're opportunists sometimes, and they certainly do. So that does happen. Just like some alligators eat, baby alligators, and that's why female or mother alligators protect them.
Next up, we go to Mike. You are up with us. Mike, where are you calling from?
Mike, I'm in Albany.
Okay. Go ahead, Michael.
I have the incident in 1993, and I was going down in a building in Forest Hills on the elevator, and I ran into a shapeshifter who ran in, and he shifted from a seaman into like a very short taped tuxedo, and he didn't carry any clothes or nothing. It just completely shifted from curly hair Castilian to a long-haired vampire. And as he ran out at 11 o'clock in the morning, some lady swung her umbrella at him. I later saw his picture on the Inquirer, and he happened to be caught by a security camera as he exited the rear of a building.
Jeez. Well, Lauren, that's not a crypto hunt.
That's not cryptozoology at all.
But it's good for the show.
Moving right along. What?
That's a Friday night topic for my show, though.
Yeah, exactly, George. That's all yours. Oh, well.
What's you've gone on a lot of these expeditions. What's the scariest time you've ever had?
Having the IRS do an audit. No, I'm just joking.
Well, everybody's had that in their life.
Actually, since I've been very little, I've gone on these things for 50 years now. I don't get scared, which is probably pretty scary. That I should get more scared, but I'm absolutely not afraid, because I really conceptualize that what I'm doing is looking for new animals. I'm looking for animals that just humans don't understand. So some of the most scary times are when humans, I'm in the backwoods someplace, and there's some humans coming around with rifles searching for these things, and that's what scares me more than the creatures.
Well, I had a call 6-7 months ago from a ex-Marine who loves the show, but he said, George, we're all going hunting. We're bringing our rifles. We're looking for Bigfoot. We're going to shoot him and bring him back. And I talked him out of it, I think. I mean, because to me, unless you're being attacked and you're physically being harmed, you're not supposed to shoot these creatures, Lauren, are you?
Not really. I don't think that that's going to help us find more about them. And in fact, I've talked to individuals who have shot them, and because they then get scared that they've broken some law or that it's an endangered species, they then dispose of the body. And it doesn't help us at all, because people get scared that, they've either killed a human or they've broken some federal law. They bury the bodies or burn the bodies. And this has happened throughout North America. And we have a case just right now, that I talked about and posted yesterday in Greece. It happened a couple days ago. A man was out hunting for wild boar, and he was wearing animal skins to go in camouflage. Well, he got shot by 2 other hunters and killed because he had animal skins on. And so, it doesn't do any good to think you should go out there and shoot Bigfoot, because you might actually shoot another hunter.
Absolutely. Lauren, thanks so much for being on the show.
It's great to have a good New Year and
you
good
too,
holidays.
my friend. It's the Crypto Hunter, Lauren Coleman. For Jesse Angelo, Gina Yates, Dan Galanti, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean LaDesseur, Ross Mitchell, George Knapp, Ian Punnett, and Art Bell. I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe.